Hey everybody, Coldon here with another VOX Immortalis commentary guide. This video is for heroic Shannox in Firelands, and this shows 10 man. So unlike the normal version of this fight where you'd probably kill Rageface first, and then possibly Riplim, and then finally Shannox, on heroic the mechanics and specifically the health pools of the dogs prevent this strategy from working. You'll see Shannox has about 34 million health, whereas Rageface has actually more than that. So instead, you have to focus all your DPS on Shannox and control the dogs throughout the fight. And this is made more difficult in Heroic by an additional debuff the dogs will gain every time they melee someone. So when they deal a physical attack, they'll gain a stacking buff that increases their damage by 5% per stack. This can stack up pretty much infinitely, and it lasts for 20 seconds. So to survive, especially Rageface, who likes to target random people, you need to keep this buff from stacking too high. And thus you need to prevent the dogs from attacking someone for 20 seconds at a time. So I'll talk about Riplim later on, but for now this is mostly a trick to controlling Rageface. So when Rageface uses his Face Rage ability, you've seen that in normal. In heroic, the person that breaks that effect by getting that first big hit will gain a debuff for 15 seconds called Rage, and this basically is a fixate effect. That person will then become the fixate target of Rageface for those 15 seconds. And of course this allows that player to move Rageface wherever they please, and in this case they should please to move him to a crystal trap. So for our raid, our Arcane Mage happens to be the one that usually gets the Face Rage effect broken, and thus he will move Rageface to the nearest crystal trap. Once Rageface is trapped, the trap only lasts about 10 seconds, and the debuff we're trying to get rid of is 20 seconds long. So usually to get rid of it, we have to buy ourselves a little more time. And we do this by moving the entire raid, including Shannox, away from that trapped location. So you'll see our mage is moving Rageface to the bottom right here, and there's a trap. And then we have the raid stay far away from that trap and also watch for Rageface's upcoming target. So when he breaks out of the trap, if he's chasing you, you need to run away from him so that you buy yourself a few more seconds and allow that debuff to drop off. If done properly, the buff should never really go above 20 or so. And ideally you want to use every trap on Rageface if possible. So that covers getting rid of his buff, but Shannox and Riplim, in our case, we're using a range tactic to handle the Jagged Terror stacks. So if you notice, there's been quite a few raid markers around the room, and behind me there's a purple one there. So to the right, you can't really see it quite yet, but along the path there's a yellow raid marker, and that dictates the location for our off-tank, who is handling Riplim throughout the fight. He basically keeps Riplim as close to that mark as possible, and then we have 4 different raid markers sort of forming a rough circle that are 80 yards away from that center location. So the outside ones form the circle where our tank will kite Shannox around the room. And this is to prevent traps from getting too stacked up, of course, but it also allows you to buy yourself a little more time when Riplim returns with the spear before Shannox picks it up. So the basic process is that Riplim is tanked on his yellow location, Shannox is 80 yards away. Shannox will throw his spear toward Riplim. As soon as that spear animation goes out, the Riplim tank will quickly run away, dragging Riplim 20 yards or so if possible, and just buying a little more time. Once Riplim starts his animation, he'll go to pick up the spear, and then he'll run it back to Shannox. And as soon as Shannox, of course, grabs the spear, he'll then be able to stack his bleed effect again. You know all that from normal. So for heroic, by using this range tactic, we're able to generally control the bleed stacks of both tanks, and also, just by association, remove the debuff on Ripplim himself, the 20-second debuff. So the only problem is that Ripplim is a little bit too fast for this 80-yard distance to be enough time unless you use some sort of snare effect on Ripplim. So throughout this fight, for the most of it, you'll have a debuff on Ripplim that prevents him from being snared, pretty much. But when he goes into his animation to fetch the spear, that debuff will start to drop off, and it will only slowly come back over time. So essentially, the moment that he notices the spear and turns to attack it, he should be snared. So if right there he was going to the spear, you may have seen a curse effect, and this is our Warlock, who is using a Curse of Exhaustion. So as soon as that process starts, he gets snared by a ranged player, and then he's snared throughout that entire process of retrieving the spear and bringing it back to Shannox. By snaring him throughout this buys you enough time to get the bleed stacks off of the tanks. So I should also mention, if you use this range tactic, that 80-yard distance is pretty important, because if you get too far beyond it, we think it's 100 yards, but we're not positive, then Shannox will gain a damage haste buff for being basically separated from his dogs. So if you're like 100 yards away from either dog, he gets pissed off until you move them close enough. So yeah, you can kind of see the layout right there. The yellow spot on the right, and then 80 yards to the left is one of our markers. So we just kind of kite around in this circle, and that's it. So that's Heroic Shannox. Hope that helps. Good luck, and thanks for watching.